Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about work health and safety risk control. My name is Michael Terry, I'm from Momentum Safety and Ergonomics, and this is the 5-Minute Safety Series. Okay, when we're talking about work health and safety risk control, what we're really wanting to do is implement some sort of system. We need a system because oftentimes our intuitions are not always the best when it comes to controlling risk, and we need to have something that drives us towards the controls that are going to be the most effective and get the most consistent results. And that system we call the hierarchy of control. So the hierarchy of control is really just a cascading list of ways that we can control risk, the top being the most effective and the bottom being the least effective. And we've got to come up with a combination of risk controls from the hierarchy that's going to be the best way to control our risk. So I want to just move on through and have a look at each element of the hierarchy of control so that we can understand what they mean and use that to push us towards better risk control. Elimination is the top because it's the way that we can take away the hazard altogether. So elimination is the most effective because now you don't have a hazard at all and the risk is controlled. It's not always the most practical though, because obviously you can't eliminate all hazards in the workplace. You've got to have other ways to control them. So the other ways that we can control things are using things like substitution. So substitution might take a hazardous chemical, for example, and use a much safer system of cleaning that uses either safer chemicals or no chemicals. It's a different way, same outcome, much safer. Engineering controls look at using equipment or mechanical processes, or it might be some sort of isolation control to interact or change the way the person interacts with the hazard. So here we go, here's an example of an engineering control where a person is using a tug to pull the trolleys along, where otherwise the person would have had to have done that manually. Here's another engineering control, which is more like an isolation control, where there's a physical barrier, a fence protecting the person from the hazardous situation, which is the edge of the roof there, and obviously the risk that they might fall. So that's an engineering control that is isolating the person from a hazard. And there's lots of other examples of engineering controls, and they really are a most effective way of controlling our hazards. Administrative controls are looking at the way the person interacts with the hazard. So now we're trying to control the person, which is why they're now level 3 controls, by using things like training, work procedures, even signage is a form of administrative control. So yes, we need to make sure that the person understands, and oftentimes supervision is a really important part of administrative controls as well. So finally at the very bottom, PPE. So this is our personal protective equipment that we put on. So PPE is a form of administrative control because it needs to be actually used. But also when you think about what PPE does, it doesn't really control the hazard at all. It just tries to change the effects of the person interacting with the hazard, or the effects that the hazard has on the actual person. So here's an example of a man using lots of different PPE, ranging from gloves to protective eyewear to hearing, respiratory protection. Those sorts of things are all types of personal protective equipment. So we're not saying they don't have a place, but we're saying that they come last. You've got to try and get engineering and other higher order controls before you move down to your administration and PPE. So we've decided on what controls we want. We now have to implement those controls, and this is a really important process as well. We must consider both short and long-term controls. The short ones control the risk right now. The long ones are the most effective controls that we build into our systems long-term. We need to make sure that we assign someone responsibility and due dates to get the job done. We can monitor it through safety committees. I've always thought that's a great idea, and you should build a risk register, which is a way of monitoring and also documenting the implementation of your controls. So let's have a look at the takeaways from work health and safety risk control today. We really have just introduced the hierarchy of control today. So it's a system that we use to control or work out what's the most effective way of controlling risk. We work our way from the top down, and we can build multiple levels of control there. So you might have an engineering and an administrative control as your optimal way of controlling that risk. when it comes to implementing controls, it's just as critical, and it should be treated as per any other business objective, where if you really want to get the job done, you assign responsibility, timeframes, and monitor your performance. If you treat it in that way, your risk control will get done just the same way as the other important business objectives that you have. So thanks very much for listening to our 5-minute safety series on work health and safety risk control. Check out these links for other videos in the 5-minute safety series.